Yes, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear all, I hope we are heard, that this part of the voice is possible to hear by you. Once again, apologize for this delay. It's right now more or less 15 minutes later than it should be. I hope there is Dr. Ketty W. Chen with us. Hello, we are very happy to have you with us. So as just to make a very, very short introduction towards the third panel, Taiwan's democracy in the age of pandemic and information manipulation. The first presentation will be by Ms. Chen from Taiwan Foundation for Democracy, and Ms. Chen is vice president of that very important foundation. And she will talk about democracy under threat, how Taiwan combat information manipulation from China. Then we will have the presentation of Christina Chen from Institute for National Defense and Security Research about democracies in retreat as a question, challenges and future prospects in post-pandemic East Asia. And then we'll have a presentation from Eva Trojnar from Jagiellonian University in Kraków about revision of health diplomacy during the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's again a little bit different than in the former schedule of our today's conference, but this makes us here a little bit more comfortable, and we have a little bit more time. So just for the moment, Ms. Chen, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's really my pleasure to join all of you guys to talk about some of very important issues that we're currently dealing with in Taiwan. But first, my apology that I have to leave to another online meeting at 7:30 my time. So I just wanted to apologize ahead of time. But I just want to go over a little bit about what Taiwan has been experiencing when it comes to China's authoritarian influence. It is not only information manipulation. I just want to also mention that there's other influence operation going on in Taiwan. But today, for my presentation, I'll focus on the information manipulation part. First of all, Taiwan, or its official name, Republic of China, is one of the most, I would say, vibrant democracy in Asia. According to Freedom House's report last year, Taiwan actually scored 94 out of 100 points and ranked #2 democracy in Asia. And of course, in the freedom of the net, Taiwan was, for the very first time, included in the report last year. It ranked #5 in the world and, of course, #1 in the region. According to the report from the Economist Intelligence Unit, EIU, their democracy index, Taiwan ranked as #1 full democracy in Asia. And globally, when it comes to this ranking, Taiwan climbed to #8, actually up 3 places from 2020, scoring almost 9 points out of 10. And I also wanted to mention that the people of Taiwan are actually extremely proud of the country's democratic achievements in the past 3 decades. So essentially, Taiwan is relatively a very new democracy, but its people are really proud of its accomplishment. And according to an annual poll that our foundation conducted last year, nearly 80%, so 80% of the Taiwanese surveyed believed that the democratic system or the democratic way of life is the best system for Taiwan, even though they understand the fact that democracy has some shortcomings. I might also add that 70+% of the Taiwanese, if we ask them if their democratic way of life is under threat, are they willing to come and defend Taiwan's democratic way of life? More than 70% of the Taiwanese say yes when it comes to if China used military methods to trying to annex Taiwan. And my foundation is currently conducting this year's survey on Taiwan's perspective and perception on democracy and their willingness to defend Taiwan. I'm actually very interested in finding out the result this year, given the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So I would also say that the vibrant democracy of Taiwan really serves as a constant reminder to China on what it is not. Taiwan's democratic existence dispelled that the Chinese Communist Party's narrative that democracy is not only a product of the West, and it is incompatible with Chinese or Asian culture. So Taiwan dispelled that notion. Taiwan's democracy now serves as a lot of countries' model in the region, and also prove that democracy works in Asia. And democracy in Asia can be peaceful, stable, and vibrant. In addition, Taiwan now has a very strong national identity that is vastly different from Chinese. The population of Taiwan, especially amongst the youth population, identify themselves as Taiwanese only, rather than both Taiwanese and Chinese. And those who see themselves as Taiwanese only really dwindled down in the single digits within the last decade. According to the National Zhenji University's Election Study Center's poll, the proportion of Taiwanese who identify themselves as Taiwanese increased 22% from the early 1990s to approximately 60% last year. So those who identify with dual identity as both Chinese and Taiwanese, they witness a sharp decline from 50% to less than 30%. So those who identify as only Chinese was down to 2.8%, so even less than 5%, while more than 90% of those surveyed consider themselves as consider Taiwanese as part of their identity. So when you face with a large country who claims that Taiwan is historically part of the unalienated territory of its country, then how does China trying to influence Taiwan or coast Taiwanese into believing or becoming part of China? That's one of the issues that the People's Republic of China has to deal with especially in the past few years. So as a result, the PRC, they are uncompromisingly intensify its influence operation in Taiwan. And also it's is also using Taiwan as a testing ground and training ground to improve its methods of influence operation. As I mentioned in the outset of my talk, influence operation comes in different forms and methods. And one of the most utilized methods of influence operation is the use of information manipulation. We don't use fake news anymore because information manipulation also comes in very different forms. So I also wanted to mention that China's influence operation against Taiwan or Taiwan's democracy can be categorized in serving four main purposes. First, to corrode Taiwan's democratic institutions, national and local elections, and of course, corrode the public trust on the democratic system of Taiwan. Secondly, Chinese influence operation, they sought to undermine Taiwanese people's confidence, so their will to resist is weakened, and their feeling of abandonment and isolation magnified. And most importantly, the CCP's intent is for the Taiwanese people to feel that becoming part of China is inevitable. That will definitely happen, regardless of help from any other democratic allies and countries. So third, information manipulation is there to polarize division and promote hatred between members of societies and classes of society, between ethnic groups, to polarize. And lastly, to co-opt politicians, retired military officers, civil servants, and of course the business community. With the failure of capturing the hearts and mind of the Taiwanese people, and also entice the business community, China really is stepping up its information manipulation. I just want to mention, for example, in last year, 2021, information manipulation within Taiwan can be categorized in 4 categories, because we're also trying to survive the COVID-19 pandemic. Vaccine issues of the COVID virus is one of the issues that information manipulation is rampant. Also, Taiwan had 4 referendums in the end of last year. That was another occasion that Chinese information manipulation became rampant. And of course, Taiwan's relations with the international community and the public trust on Taiwanese government. Some of the example of Taiwan's international relations targets Taiwan's relationship with democratic allies. For example, last summer, when the U.S. troop pulled out of Afghanistan, you see information manipulation and promotions of information such as it seems that the United States is backing Taiwan right now, but eventually the U.S. will abandon Taiwan like the U.S. abandoned Afghanistan. It's permeating in Taiwan social media. And for example, information manipulation also states the United States gave up Vietnam, Hong Kong, Afghanistan. So eventually Taiwan will become one of those countries that the US gave up. And the very popular slogan, today's Afghanistan is tomorrow's Taiwan. So these are some of the examples of information manipulation that has been distributed by not only Chinese state-owned media, but also the collaborator within Taiwan. And then when it comes, and another example of information manipulation is of the COVID-19 vaccine. From Taiwan's lack of ability to purchase vaccine to democratic nations' donation of vaccine to Taiwan. For example, the U.S. Donations to Taiwan's vaccine, it's because of the U.S. national interest. Japan's donation of COVID-19 vaccine to Taiwan are vaccines that the Japanese did not want to use, or it's past the expiration date. So information like that are what we have been seeing last year when it comes to the origins being in China. So and also what happens in Taiwanese social media is doctored photographs, videos of Taiwanese presidents to sow doubts within the minds of the Taiwanese on their own democratic elected leader, painting themselves as not caring for the people, only caring for elections and campaigns, so on and so forth. So, I've mentioned some of these examples. I'm more than happy to discuss this during the discussion session. So this is what Taiwan has been experiencing. So what has Taiwan been doing when it comes to combating information manipulation? For example, on the government side, Taiwanese government actually dedicated a lot of resources to counter China's political influence. For example, Taiwan's premier, Su Zhenchang, he ordered government ministries to provide clarification of disinformation within 90 minutes to 2 hours upon discovery. And also the executive yuan, where Premier Su presides, also created web pages and Line group, which is the most utilized chat groups in Taiwan, to provide timely clarification. And also President Tsai Ing-wen appointed a former civic tech community member and hacker, Miss Audrey Tang, as Taiwan's first digital minister. And part of her portfolio is to combat to reach out to society and combat disinformation. And in addition to the government's effort to combat information manipulation, I think I want to mention the vibrant civil societies of Taiwan, of taking up the task of combating information manipulation from China. During Taiwan's democratization, civil societies are advocates of democracy and human rights. And now when Taiwan's democracy is under threat, civil society members come together and create methods to combat information manipulation. Lastly, I just want to mention just a few of members of civil society. They can be categorized in 3 categories. For example, organizations such as Doublethink Lab and Information Operation Research Group. They are formed by very capable young people with the aim to research, compile, and publish reports, short and long, to inform Taiwan's domestic population and also international community of China's information warfare. Organization as Doublethink Lab and IORG, they also offer policy recommendations and work with government institutions and members. So the agencies can be armed with more tools to tackle information manipulation. For example, in 2020, Doublethink Lab published Chinese Infodemic in Taiwan, a preliminary study on decimation model and disinformation. And this is one of the examples of these organizations fulfilling the goal to inform the public. And then second category is the fact-checked civil society organizations. For example, Taiwan Fact Check Center. Another organization is called MyGoPen. It's the name is it's a Taiwanese pronunciation of stop lying to us. So, for example, these organizations filtered almost 270,000 posts between January and March of 2020 to identify different themes, different narratives of manipulation, information manipulation, just about the pandemic alone. But then, there's another category that I want to mention is organizations such as the Open Culture Foundation and Fake News Cleaner. They share responsibility of providing information literacy to domestic communities, and they also on themselves develop educational material on media literacy to educate the public on information warfare. So, for example, from 2018 to 2020, Fake News Cleaner, they managed to host more than 400 physical lectures through Taiwan. They trained lecturers and volunteers and interacted with 500,000 individuals from all ages. And the worrisome findings by these NGOs are, people's lack of media literacy. So this is exactly what they are trying to do. And of course, proposing curriculum to and work with Taiwan's Ministry of Education to propose curriculums for media literacy for younger Taiwanese population. So these are some of the examples of how Taiwan combats information manipulation. I think this is one of the things that Taiwan really can serve as examples to countries in the region and offer technologies and methods to countries that is in need or is suffering from information manipulation. I think I will stop right here and then listen to other presentations and answer questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Chen. A lot, very, very insightful, interesting presentation. Also, all the time, this not very easy position of trying to make the time in order. And I hope we will have great discussion in the end of this panel, which will try to end somehow 1:30 Polish time. So as exactly like it is in the schedule. Because we have one person less in presentation in this panel. So, dear Ms. Christina Chen, please, the floor is yours. And of course, the more minutes we have for discussion, it's always an advantage, but on the other hand, we are very interested in listening to your presentation. Do we have Ms. Christina Chen with us? We can see that. Oh yes.
Yeah, thank you, and I'm really happy to be invited to talk about this topic, and I think it's a great follow-up to Dr. Chen's talk on China's use of information manipulation on Taiwan. And but this is a very rough presentation on democracies, and the question is whether democracies are in retreat. The answer, the short answer is yes. Democracies are in retreat, and for the rest of the talk, I'll be looking at East Asia. And Dr. Chen cited the Freedom House index, and here I use the same index and last year's Freedom House Global Freedom Index. And last year's Freedom House Global Index, they claimed that it was actually the 16th consecutive year of decline in terms of global freedom. So yeah, we should be worrying about democracies in retreat, not just in this region, but on a global scale. And here I have a screenshot taken from their website. And while the Freedom House Global Index denotes 3 categories, and according to their index, countries are either free, as denoted in the color green, or they are partially free in the colors brown or kind of yellow mustardish. And then the purple colors are countries they deem not free. So just look at the map, the sad
Ms. Chen, I wish
answer,
to let you know that we see still the first, Ms. Christina, do you hear us?
Yes.
We still see only the first slide of your presentation, so maybe.
Can you see the second? I will be on the second.
Only the first for the moment. That's why I am interrupting you, which I'm sorry for. Oh. Yeah, now it works.
What about now?
It's great now.
Okay, so let me try to.
Now it's the second one.
Okay. Okay. So the sad news is that in East Asia, the majority of the countries are not free, okay, according to the Freedom House Global Freedom Index. And the color green countries, Taiwan, we talked about Taiwan. Taiwan is in green. And Japan is also green, and South Korea, and this is Mongolia. So yeah, so I mean, in terms of the index, yes, the answer is that democracies are in retreat. And I would like to spend some time to talk about the effect of COVID pandemic on democracies. And I think the pandemic has a deteriorating and negative impact on democracies and freedoms. And this is because the pandemic, just like other kinds of emergencies, tend to give the political leaders, whether they are leaders in democracies or authoritarian regimes, more opportunity to expand control over their society. It's true whether it be democracies or authoritarian countries. With that said, let me cite the example of China, because I look at China, I study China. And I think even though China starts off as a non-democracy, it is an authoritarian country. COVID, the pandemic, does give the ruling Chinese Communist Party more power and more control over its society and its citizens. In China, we saw the abridgment of fundamental rights. And Dr. Chen, in her previous talk, talked about information. So China does not only use information manipulation towards other countries like Taiwan. It also used information manipulation against its own citizens, its own people. And China is known for being a government that's heavy on censorship. And recall that during the initial outbreak of COVID, and many people speculate that COVID outbreak started in Wuhan, China. There's a group of doctors, they found the coronavirus, and they wanted to tell their colleagues and tell their family and friends about this new virus. But these doctors, including the Yuan Liang, they were quickly penalized for their behaviors. Even though those doctors were, we call them whistleblowers, and their acts could have prevented the further spread of the COVID. But the CCP and the local authorities, they were worried about information like the new virus would have a negative impact on their control. So they try to wipe out this kind of information from online, and they would punish those people for spreading messages and information about the virus. So this is a example of control on information, and not just in Wuhan, but in many other Chinese cities, they saw the government using very stringent lockdown measures in attempt to control the spread of the COVID. And Shanghai is still under the very draconian lockdown measures. And throughout the lockdown in Shanghai, there's numerous stories about the Shanghai residents having inadequate access to food and medicines and other kinds of basic necessities. There's even stories about Shanghai residents, once they were tested positive, they would be taken to the quarantine facilities, and they found the quarantine facilities to be half built with very poor facilities and no one there to take care of, to look after them. And there's even a story, about a dog who was once belonged to an owner, but the owner was tested positive, so was taken away to quarantine, and the dog was beaten to death by the I guess it's the police or the guy in the quarantine authority, because the police thought the dog was infected with COVID. So throughout the lockdown in Shanghai, we see so many cases, so many stories about people experiencing inhumane treatments, to the point that I think a couple weeks ago, there's a analysis online comparing the Shanghai lockdown experience to concentration camp in Xinjiang. And the editorial says, is Shanghai becoming like Xinjiang? And I think this is very ironic and very sad, because Shanghai is the most affluent city in China. It's the most urbanized and most modern city. And the people there, during the lockdown, they had to experience this kind of inhumane treatment. So human rights violation, for sure. And following what I just said, during the lockdown, the people in China saw their state, the government, expanding surveillance upon them. And the government does not shy away from using artificial intelligence technology and social control system to monitor, to police their people, to make sure that their people will comply with the lockdown measures. So expanded state surveillance. And I think these two things, the abridgment of fundamental rights, along with the expanded state surveillance upon the people, gave the CCP leadership more power, more control over the society and their citizens. Can you see the slide change? I'm on the next slide.
Yes, we do.
Okay, good. Okay, so some people might say, well, okay, this is what internal developments in China, and yes, China is becoming more totalitarian. It's not just authoritarian, it's turning to like a totalitarian regime. True, but what does it have to do with the rest of East Asia? Dr. Chen, when she talked about Taiwan, it's a perfect example of how China being authoritarian and totalitarian now is having a negative impact on democracy in Taiwan. And I think China's political systems and developments are definitely undermining democracies elsewhere. Hong Kong is a good example. Besides Taiwan, Hong Kong is an example. I mean, we already see Hong Kong, even before the so-called 50 years deadline, the CCP leadership has dismantled the freedoms in Hong Kong. So if the Hong Kong people want to criticize Hong Kong government, they will get taken away to jail, and they will be disappeared. So Hong Kong is a good example where China is having a negative impact on Hong Kong freedoms. And China being authoritarian is condoning, tolerating authoritarian regimes in other countries. It is widely known that China supports North Korea. And throughout the Russia-Ukrainian war, the invasion of Ukraine, even though the United States and the West continue to pressure China to make a stance to join the sanction efforts against Russia, China, up to today, refused to make a position to join the sanction efforts. So by that, it's very clear that China is tolerating, is supporting those authoritarian regimes. And this has an indirect effect on helping those authoritarian regimes to survive. And I think the previous speakers talked about this. China is not shy from using the so-called sharp power and gray zone tactics against Taiwan. And we learned about the effort by the CCP to manipulate information. And from Taiwan, we can also testify to the fact that the PLA, People's Liberation Army, constantly sends military aircrafts across Taiwan Strait. And many times these aircrafts will fly into Taiwan's ADIZ. Those are China's attempt to intimidate us on Taiwan, to try to coerce Taiwan to give up being sovereign and the willingness to stay as a sovereign state. And there's also another example of China doing things on the South China Sea, building up artificial islands and building military stations there. I mean, those are gray zone tactics used by China, and these kind of acts have a negative impact on democracies in other places. So my conclusion is that yes, democracies are in retreat, and it's something that we should really worried about. And I think coming from political science major, we used to look at China as a case that a deviant case, or a case that poses challenge to conventional arguments in political science. For example, we used to think that China poses a challenge to democratic peace theory, or that China defies the conventional wisdom about how democracies lead to growth and development. But I think the recent developments do show that those conventional wisdoms still hold true, because authoritarian regimes, as evidenced by China, breed conflicts, and they disrupt economic growth and development. And not to mention, they do not respect human rights and freedoms, so they definitely endanger human lives and health. And China is not only quietly supporting, condoning the authoritarian regimes, Xi Jinping is actually calling out on other developing countries, especially non-democracies, to band together as an effort to counter democracy. So this is something we should be very worried about, the trend. But I think the good thing is that there seems to be an alliance of democracies in action. And this is evidenced by the growing international support for Ukraine. And the late news is that the UN General Assembly has voted to suspend Russia from the Human Rights Council. So these are positive signs, and I hope those will continue, so that the democracies together can counter the rising influence of authoritarianism. And that's my talk, and thank you for your time.
Thank you a lot. And for our dream is also to have several means of discussion. Let me just directly ask Professor Eva Trojnar to join us and to present her perspective on revision of health diplomacy during the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, if we may also ask to turn off the presentation by Ms. Christina Chen.
Good afternoon, anyways. Very happy to see you, even though
we are also happy to see you. So we will try to make everything till half past one. So I am sure you understand that the minutes for discussion is somehow
absolutely. I'll do my best.
But of course, the floor is yours.
Sure. Well, I have a presentation for you, but since I'm not able to display it because the other one is, let me just I'll try to express what was my idea when I was when I applied to join the conference with this title, Revision of Health Diplomacy During the COVID pandemic. Well, of course, I was referring to Taiwan, and of course, I was referring to China as well, because, well, this comparison, as already it was expressed here, is a deviant one, is an interesting one, and it's a one that I'm researching since a couple of years, as everyone knows. So the experience of COVID-19 pandemic outbreak has shown to all of us that health threats can be of transnational and transnational character. Oh, it seems I'm able to present. Sorry for that interruption.
No, nothing to be sorry. We are happy to have you that you have this opportunity. Yeah.
Please confirm if you see the presentation. Yes, it's visible.
Yes, we do.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So it's not surprising that following the outbreak of the pandemic, the role of health diplomacy began to be emphasized by many countries in the world. And as I said, Taiwan is no exception. China is no exception as well. And there's always a problem with second slide. If it goes, then I'm happy. Does it?
Yes, it goes.
Perfect. So the literature review on health diplomacy became to be really vast during last 2 years, and I'm the one who would like to participate in this debate. It's a new topic for me, and I explore it since 2020, and I'm very happy, and it's a really a lively debate. So the literature review suggests that health diplomacy could be defined twofold. The first definition refers to the tension between securing global public health on one hand and serving national interests on the other. The second of these typical definitions refers to means of health diplomacy, particularly whether it is executed multilaterally, regionally, or bilaterally. And well, this made me think about Taiwan, and this made me think of China, to see and compare, as usual, to focus on the challenges between those two countries. So the pandemic definitely exposed the importance of health diplomacy in foreign policy. China was a very peculiar example of its achievements, and it well, contrasting to Taiwan, which was very successful with fighting with coronavirus, at least at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. Therefore, I decided not to ask if the outbreak influenced diplomatic strategy, or if it was incorporated to the foreign policy in Taiwan, what is a well-known fact today, but how effective it is, and contrast it to the policies executed in China, because PRC also refers to health diplomacy in its foreign policy, in order to save its reputation as a responsible stakeholder, as they claim to be. And so I was just trying to research whether the idea of this definition fits the public diplomacy, in this case health diplomacy, of Taiwan and China as well. So soon after the COVID outbreak, China and Taiwan, as many other countries in the world, rushed with donations of face masks, of PPE, of ventilators, doctors, later vaccines. So all countries around the world were exchanging their needs. Well, it included both rivals, underdeveloped, developed, big or small countries, no exception. And this interim support between the countries at the beginning of pandemic was very chaotic. Majority of the first donations were delivered based on the demands and the stocks. So soon commentators and academics used to name it and develop new terms like mask diplomacy, respirator diplomacy, vaccine diplomacy, COVID-19 diplomacy. So having that all in mind, I decided to use a more general term, health diplomacy. And to my understanding, China and Taiwan activities announced publicly during 2020 gradually changed the approach from this initial chaos donations and developed it and incorporated it into diplomatic strategy, utilizing and exploring all levels, methods and kinds of health diplomacy. Taiwan emphasized transparency since early outbreak of the pandemic, both on domestic and international level. Taiwan also concentrated on donations and supplies to its diplomatic allies and to so-called like-minded partners, mostly bilaterally, but also regionally through the European Union in Europe and Central American integration system in Central America. In March 2020, Taiwan and the US established a partnership to fight against coronavirus. And only 2 weeks later, Taiwan did the same with Australia. Taiwanese model in a fight against the coronavirus pandemic has been adopted in New Zealand, in Israel, and for many countries in the world it became an inspiration. Japan, which is also a subject of our conference, may also serve an example. Not surprisingly, this was a direct pretext for reviving the discussion about Taiwan's membership in WHO, which was supported directly by the President Tsai Ing-wen herself, who also appeared in promotion materials, Taiwan model. We could see it in YouTube. And she was saying that no one can isolate a friend who truly wants to help. Taiwan can help, Taiwan is helping. This slogan was really great. Taiwan was also helping through the new southbound policy, which is a foreign policy direction since Tsai Ing-wen took power in 2016. However, this strategy that Taiwan developed didn't translate into radical changes, into vital changes of Taiwan on international arena. So Taiwan did not fulfill its needs in this way. What could it be? Absolutely WHO participation, 2021, 2022. When Taiwan was refused an observer status due to political concerns from China. In the contrary, China did its job in health diplomacy, but it has reacted really slowly, and we could understand that China's task was not simple, and probably we shouldn't assess China's deals only by the capacities and potential, which of course is vast and not comparable to much smaller Taiwan. But after the outbreak of the pandemic, China's global image dramatically worsened. China had to save its reputation and from the country from which the coronavirus spread worldwide. So it had to change the initial narratives on COVID, very controversial interactions with WHO, somehow combine it with national interest and follow the tools, methods of health diplomacy, whatever it could do to save the image in the world. So China was also using bilateral links, but also in the second stage of implementing health diplomacy, more institutionalized links like its BRE that might serve an example and is already well researched by academia. Finally, China also joined COVAX, a global mechanism for vaccination, in October 2020. And was developing several vaccines. Of course, we may today argue about their effectiveness. In the European Union in 2020, which is the most important year for me for that research, perceptions of China have worsened to a significant degree during the crisis. For example, here on this slide, the European Union, the European Council for Foreign Relations survey done in summer 2020 shows that France and Denmark, 62% of respondents had a negative view on China. The least negative view China shared in Bulgaria, 22%, in Poland, 33%. Pew Research Center data also supports this trend, so the China's image drop, while in 12 countries, people were asked the same question prior to COVID, and then in summer 2020 to summer 21. So China really was in trouble. And also in Taiwan, in summer 2020 survey presented by MAC, we could notice that the results really depict the highest percentage seen in nearly 15 years. The first question asked participants were about if they consider China unfriendly towards Taiwan's government and people, and the percentage of public believing that the mainland Chinese government attitude towards Taiwan's government is unfriendly was almost 75%. It is much higher than the share believing it's friendly, it's just 11%. Regarding the mainland government, mainland Chinese government attitude towards Taiwanese people, 60%, 61% of the public belief it is unfriendly. It somehow echoes the results, recent results that Dr. Ketty Chen already covered. So 70+% wants to defend Taiwan if China attacks Taiwan. So there is still strong tendency in that. In summary, what happened to my research? So we have to agree that health diplomacy was intentionally incorporated by Taiwan and China to its foreign strategies by serving the global health responsibilities. In response to problems, in case of Taiwan, international recognition, WHO, WHA participation, in terms of China, global image drop, proving being responsible stakeholders, and both governments referred to health diplomacy, giving its priority importance. Initial research that I've conducted indicate that health diplomacy in 2020 was characterized by a great deal of bilateral activities, and during the outbreak of the pandemic, both Taiwan and China utilized regional links, networks of cooperation in terms of Taiwan New Southbound policy, in terms of China BRI, and well, China also got involved into multilateral mechanisms. However, Taiwan was not very successful in that field. So evidence shows that there is a great potential for bilateral cooperation in a field of health diplomacy, but it does not translate to the deals on a global scale. And in terms of, well, researching and putting something into academia, I would really suggest including health diplomacy when we are assessing countries' soft power, smart power as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you a lot for a very interesting view towards this novel problematic to some extent because of the novel circumstances. And now we have several minutes for discussion. Of course, it includes all the three presentations of Ms. Ketty W. Chen and Ms. Christina Chen and Ms. Eva Trojnar. If anyone wishes to have a comment or ask question, please feel free to do so.
Can I ask one question?
Of course. Professor Osaya, please.
Well, thank you very much. I really enjoy all the presentations, and I have been particularly interested in China's influence operation in Taiwan, because China's influence operation has been quite active recent years, also in Japan as well. So we are fortunate to have two particular Taiwanese speakers, Dr. Chen, Dr. Chen, Ketty, and Christina. So I want to know your view about the risks and how the seriousness of China's influence operation, particularly in Taiwan, how people influenced by China's influence operation, how Taiwanese government trying to resist to these mainland China's influence operations. So can I have your views, Ketty and Christina?
Because of the time, I only discuss information manipulation. But there's all other methods of information influence operation through academia, through the business community, through politicians. But information manipulation is one of the most, I would say, dire situation that Taiwan has to deal with. So as I mentioned, there's 4 things that China's information manipulation wanted to do. And of course, first and foremost is to erode Taiwan's quality of democracy, create polarization between societies. And, you know, as I also mentioned, to trying to erode Taiwan's international relations. For example, Taiwan's good relations with Japan. And then for, you know, by publishing misinformation about Japan's donation of a vaccine to Taiwan. But, you know, for me personally, that part of the information manipulation actually did not really work really well in Taiwan because of the relationship Japan has with Taiwan, and also Taiwan's perception of Japan and Japanese government. So so for the most part, the public really appreciated the donation of vaccine and did not believe that Japan donated expiring vaccine to Taiwan. But then at the same time, the Taiwanese government, the foreign ministry, also issue clarifications repeatedly to the Taiwanese public to try to dispel that notion. So I'm just using that as an example of what the PRC is trying to do, but how the government also is trying to combat that. So that's been happening repeatedly. And this year is another local election year. So we're also observing the spike of information campaign in Taiwan as we speak.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your answer.
Okay, I think Dr. Chen has covered most of the things I want to say, but there's one, I guess one thing I would like to add. I think, yes, the Chinese CCP effort to manipulate information and an attempt to infiltrate, to dismantle Taiwanese democracy has never ceased and will continue to go on as long as they could. And then I think more people in Taiwan, not just the government, but more the civil society in Taiwan are realizing the acts of infiltration by PRC and CCP. But the late news story that draw my attention is not happening on Taiwan. It's actually happening on California. I don't know if you've noticed, there's a news about a guy. I think he's Taiwan, from Taiwan, but he went to a church in Irvine, California, where it's Taiwanese people gather to congregate and to worship God. So it's Christian, but it's mostly Presbyterian Taiwanese. And he attempted to kill those people who went to the church. And I think the police, according to the police who caught him, the police said it was hate crime. You know, he did it because he even though he's from Taiwan, he stayed part of his years was spent on Taiwan. He was pro-China, and he belonged to the I think pro-China organization in the States, from Las Vegas, and he wanted to do this mass murdering because he hates people who pro-independent. So I think that's something that caught my attention, and that's even though it's an individual act of hate crime, but it shows that how the I guess pro-independence and this narrative from PRC can encourage individuals to have murderous attempts and have to act against people who have share a different view. People from Taiwan, people who believe in democracy, and people who support independence, and maybe not independence, but just sovereign state autonomy. So that's something that I like to add to Dr. Chen's answer. I think this goes on. If we do not do something about it to stop it, it's going to have a very bad impact. It's going to create more division and more hate, more hatred among people in Taiwan. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And we see the digital yellow hand of Mr. Chen Yihua. So Professor Chen, please contribute your perspective.
All right, thank you very much. I have a question to Dr. Katie Chen. It's about China's disinformation campaign against Taiwan. Somehow I feel blaming China doing this kind of thing is just one part of the problem. The other part of the problem is, even though some Taiwanese, they know this is disinformation and this is something information spread by China for hostile purpose, but they still keep doing so. And they refuse to change how they receive information, especially for those older generation of Taiwanese or let me use the term pro-blue camp, right? So my question is, how to deal with this situation that although some Taiwanese, they already know that is disinformation from China, but they still keep spreading this kind of information.
Thank you very much for your questions. As I mentioned in my presentations, as you also mentioned, being exposed to information manipulation or laundered news is one thing. How to combat that is one of the things that we really need to pay attention to. So as my presentation mentioned, Taiwanese civil society, including and also Taiwanese government, has been proposing curriculums on media or information literacy. The curriculum 108 that's been added to the 2021 curriculum for Taiwanese youngsters is to encourage people to have critical minds when they receive information. And then civil society organizations such as Fake News Cleaner and Kofax and MyGoPen, they do go into Taiwanese community to offer lessons, to reach out to communities in order for citizens to learn about information manipulation and the horrible effects that might happen. For example, Fake News Cleaner is one of the organizations that's founded by young people, and they deliberately traveled to areas where what they deem where senior members of our society will hang out, community centers. Some of them even have set up booths at the entrance of hiking trails, so they could speak to senior citizens about the operation of their smartphones and the installation of fact-check chat bots on their smartphones. So, by providing media literacy lessons, both by Taiwanese administration and also civil society, we hope to really combat this trend of information manipulation from authoritarian regimes such as China.
Yeah, I know, but the things, the initiatives are out there and the mechanisms are out there, but some of people just refuse to use those initiatives or mechanisms. I feel it's somehow it's very hard to convince those who still keep receiving those information from China.
I think it's a work in progress. for example, one of our partners, Information Operation Research Group, when they go around Taiwan and conduct these kind of lessons, they do exit surveys of those who participate in their talk about disinformation. Positively, about 70% of the people that they spoke to came out of the lessons or gathering saying that they will, from then on, when they receive information on their cell phones, on their computers, they're willing to at least conduct some fact checks. So it's work in progress, and it happens in all the societies, and it's happening in Taiwan as well. So for me personally, I really feel positive about the efforts that the Taiwanese are making towards combating information manipulation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Unfortunately, our time is running very fast constantly. So let me just sum up that it was very interesting discussion, presentations. We had this interesting perspective of Ms. Ketty W. Chen with this threat of corroding things. It's in general, I think that it's always much easier to corrode and to destroy than to create and to build. So this is something that is always a challenge. On the other hand, I think that also underlining that this concept of information manipulation is also kind of important, because if we are hearing fake news, we don't, sometimes we think it's just, okay, so it's not so important. And if we have this concept of information manipulation, I think it's really somehow taking our focus on it, and not only but I think it may take focus on all the general audience, that this is something that is more and more risky and more important all around us. That is information manipulation. It's a great name that is showing us that with inside informations we have a lot of part manipulations, and this is a kind of important aspect of it. So that would be also very important. It is important now, and it will be important in future, unfortunately. So if you don't mind, I would like to slowly to close this panel number 3. Once again, we are very grateful for your presence, Ms. Ketty W. Chen, Ms. Christina Chen, and Ms. Eva Trojnar. And yeah, maybe let's give the small applause for everyone for this. I would suggest really literally 2 minutes a break with closing the camera for really 2-3 minutes, and we are continuing the 4th panel, and it will be moderated by most important person in this room, who is responsible for all the event, which is Professor Fiedler. So thank you a lot for being part of this project, and see you in 2-3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Radek? Radek? Tomasz?
Już minutka.
Nie, słuchajcie. Dobra, krótko. Słuchaj, ja tak z 15 minut to bym potrzebował przynajmniej.
Nie mam sprawy. Okay, we are starting now. We're moving to the fourth panel, Taiwan in International Relations. And I would like to welcome our co-organizers for a new linguistic faculty, Professor Piotr Wierzchoń and Professor Norbert Kordek. And also our...
I hope you took all the blame for my absence before.
Online, you finally have materialized in this room 56. And also I'd like to welcome Łukasz Sarek, independent scholar, also joined us here in the room. And I'd like to introduce Dean for Scientific Cooperation at the Faculty of Political Science and Journalism, Professor Maciej Walkowski. And
hello, everyone.
His topic would be a social credit system in China from the European perspective. Go on. Let's start. You can start.
Okay. First of all, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation for this very interesting and important scientific event. And let me say in a few words about this interesting topic. I mean, social credit system characterized for People Republic in China, and about Western world and especially European Union reaction connected with it. And okay, so the social credit system is an extremely interesting nationwide pilot project consisting in establishing the system of social rating, which on the basis of data collected over decades and stored both analogically and with use of state-of-the-art technologies, including data transfer in real-time 5G, face recognition and artificial intelligence, and will create profiles of citizens and businesses in the People's Republic of China. The system focused on four main spheres: national enterprises and economy, the society, the judiciary, and public administration. It is in them that the higher level of social trust and security will be ensured, law regulations better observed, and corruption eliminated, and proper transparency guaranteed. At present, there is no single combined system of social evaluation in China. Instead, there are a number of different private and state systems still not compatible with each other for monitoring and assessing enterprises, citizens, and government institutions. The Csc project was first mentioned at the early as in 2020 at the 16th Congress of Communist Party of China, when the then party secretary Jiang Zemin expressed the need to build a system of the evaluation of social credibility, which would meet the requirements of the modern market economy. In 2003, the original name was proposed. 5 years later, in 2008, for the efficient implementations of the concept, the Joint Interministerial Council on the construction of the social credit system was established, and it was decided that the first pilot monitoring and ranking system would be created, introduced, and tested. After 10 years of discussion and preparations in 2014, the Chinese State Council announced plans to build a social credit system. According to responsible government officials, social credit would rate citizens in 5 main dimensions: lawfulness, moral behavior, social engagement, activities of public interest, and environmental protection. The Csc main purpose turned to the enforcement of existing laws and regulations. This significant expansion culminated in the planning outline for the construction of Csc 2014-2020, issued by the Chinese State Council and led to its most crucial period of construction. Social credit has become a fixture of the new ideological canon of Xi Jinping thoughts of rule of law. In January 2021, the CCP Central Committee issued a new roadmap for the construction of rule of law society until 2025. It includes a section of the CSC highlighting its importance for China legal development agenda and as a supporting pillar of the legal system. Documents and the discussion of the system contains a set of terms that range from financial creditworthiness to broader trustworthiness, law-abiding behavior, or even moral values such as honesty and integrity. According to respected German think tank Merix, the roots of the CSC go back to the early 90s as a part of attempts to develop personal banking and financial credit rating systems, especially to facilitate lending in rural areas where individuals and small enterprises often lacked documented financial histories. The first blueprints of the CSC were drafted in 2007 by a group of government bodies. The level of micro-corruption in China is enormous indeed. The government also argues that the system is a way to bring in those people who are left out of the traditional credit system, such as students and low-income households. Without such mechanism, doing business in China is risky, and about half of the signed contracts are not kept. Indeed, the State Council aim is to raise the honest mentality and credit levels of the entire society in order to improve the overall competitiveness of the country. The most important area under scrutiny is not contrary to popular belief citizens. It is the sphere of companies and the national economy. The system is indeed to ensure China's economic growth and make the country the global leader, simultaneously eliminating corruption and dishonesty and increasing transparency in the Chinese market. At the same time, other issues remain to be of significance. Environmental protection, healthcare supervision, the supervision of financial operation made both by businesses and private entities, and trade. It is only in the longer term that the system will assess the behavior of all citizens. Only CCP's organizations are exempt. According to renowned expert in the field, Roger Kremers, the CSC will rate individuals and companies on the basis of various aspects of their activity, where they go to, what they buy, what they know. This evaluation becomes integrated with a large big database, which is linked not only with government information, but also with the data gathered by private enterprises. Therefore, the system creates citizens' rating by combining personal data stored by banks, e-commerce sites, and social media. At present, 47 different types of institutions are involved in shaping the system. This includes the State Council as a cross-ministerial coordinator, the National Development and Reform Commission, and the People's Bank of China, the People's Bank of China in the lead. Currently, a scoring system has been introduced or is being tested in approximately 43 cities and districts to assess social behavior. In the county-level city of Rongcheng, Shandong province, for which data on the number of points are available since 2014, citizens have been sorted into 5 grades from A+, A, B, C to D. Blacklisting is one of the key elements of China's social credit system. The largest blacklist in China is a defaulter blacklist managed by Supreme People's Court, which keeps a record of laojia individuals and companies who fail to fulfill court order obligations. The government has given a license to 8 private companies to come up with system and algorithm for SCS. The first is with China Rapid Finance, a partner of the social network behemoth Tencent, and the developer of the messaging app WeChat with more than 900 million active users. The other, Sesame Credit, is run by Ant Financial Service Group, an affiliate company of Alibaba, with Alipay at the head. Sesame Credit has also teamed up with other data generating platforms such as Didi, the ride-hailing company that was Uber's main competitor in China before it acquired the American company Chinese operations in 2016, and Baihe, the country's largest online matchmaking service. Individuals on Sesame Credit are measured by a score ranking between 315 and 915 points. The most important is a credit history, but also personal characteristics, verifying personal information, such as someone's mobile phone number and address, behavior and presence, and behavior and preference, and interpersonal relationships also checked online. People who obtain the sufficient number of points can enjoy a number of privileges, such as discount on electricity and heating, cheaper public transport, or priority in the admission to school or hospital. The CSC systems also provides for penalties in the form of points deduction for specific offenses, such as tax arrears, theft attempts, or drunken drivings. The SCS could not function so efficiently if it was not supported with modern video surveillance system. In 2018, it was estimated that there were approximately 200 million CCTV cameras. There was thus 1 camera per 7 inhabitants of the country. The Chinese authorities predicted that there would be as many as 626 million public surveillance cameras in the country by 2020. But according to the report by British portal Comparitech, the number of CCTV cameras in China will reach more than 2 billion in the nearest future. It means 2 cameras per 2 people. From the perspective of the Western world and Western countries with the democratic political system and free market economy led by US and Western Europe, there remain a number of questions and at least partly well-founded doubts concerning the idea and implementation methods of the CSC in PRC. The critics see that system as a mechanism. The critics see the system as a mechanism of social segregation, a new tool for digital scrutiny, which restricts civil liberties and any spontaneity in human behavior. They believe that the introduction of digital mechanism for the supervision of the activity of entrepreneurs, private individuals, and public institutions monitored and assessed in real time in order to automatically confront them with the positive and negative consequences of their actions. In their opinion, it is unethical, multidimensionally harmful, and unworthy of emulation, especially in free market liberal democracies. In the discourse of this issue carried out in the countries of liberal democracy, the CSC is usually perceived as Orwell's nightmare vision in which Big Brother and big data conspire to finalize the totalitarian plans of China's autocratic leaders. This vision is often compared to one of the episodes of the popular dystopian Netflix series Black Mirror, in which citizens constantly assess their interactions, converting them into scores. According to the many critics, scholars, experts, journalists, and representatives of a non-governmental organization who usually come from Western culture circle led by Western Europe, the United States, Canada, and Australia, the Chinese authorities, by implementing the CSC, decided to control the life and work of people in an almost unlimited and arbitrary way. They believe that variable parameters can be used following the model of participation and competition in computer games, I mean gamification, to freely increase or decrease one's rating, thus determining the quality of life and work of citizens and the future of business operation. with an opportunity to win and get promoted, or a threat of lose and demotion. In line with this project, the CSC will ultimately become a universal and very effective digital tool of the comprehensive surveillance and monitoring on business and personal activity. Simon Denver, Simon Dyer shares some intellectual provocation with the reader's writing. Imagine the world where the authoritarian government monitors everything you do. In this world, your score becomes the ultimate truth of which you are determining whether you can borrow money, get your children into best schools or travel abroad, whether you get a room in a fancy hotel, a seat in a top restaurant, or even just get a date. This is not the dystopian superstate of Steven Spielberg Minority Report, in which all-knowing police stop crime before it happens, but it could be China by 2025. The critics of the system say that this is not just about regulating the economy, but also about creating a new socialist utopia under the Communist Party guidance. A huge part of Chinese political theater is to claim that there is an idealized future, a utopia to head towards, said Roger Kremers. Samantha Hoffman from Australian Strategic Policy Institute points out that the region of Xinjiang in the northwest of the country has become a test bed for China's vast digital control operations. In particular, the large Muslim minority of Uyghur people has been subjected to increased surveillance and discriminations using the tools of CSC. The above and similar opinions shed light of the typical political background of the introduction of the system, which serves the purpose of not only keeping but also enhancing the authoritarian power of the CPC and the accomplishment of its long-term geostrategic goals. Any activities and statements which undermine the official party line concerning Taiwan, Hong Kong, or Xinjiang will automatically entail severe sanctions, including the significant drop in the CSC ranking and the resulting consequences. And last question, in the special resolution from September 2018 on the state of EU-China relations, the European Parliament claims, first, European Parliament first underlines that the promotion of human rights and the rule of law must be at the core of EU engagement with China. European Parliament firmly condemns the ongoing harassment, arbitrary arrest and prosecutions of human rights defenders, lawyers, journalists, bloggers, academic and labor rights defenders and their families without due process of law, including foreign nationals, both in mainland China and abroad. Underlines that the vibrant civil society and the work of human rights defenders are key to an open and prosperous society. Stresses the importance for the EU to robustly act to promote full respect for human rights in the context of its relations with China. Calls on the EU and member states to pursue a more ambitious, united and transparent policy with regard to human rights in China and to substantially consult and engage with the civil society, in particular ahead of high-level meeting and human rights dialogues. The European Parliament firmly rejects the public naming and shaming of blacklisted person as an integral part of the CSC, underlines the importance and necessity of the dialogue between EU institutions and their Chinese counterparts of all serious societal consequences of the present central planning and local experiments with SCS. Of course, the Chinese authorities reject all these arguments. They emphasize that the system is not a local invasion because people in other parts of the world have been subjected to similar solutions. In their opinion, in democratic countries, there are public monitoring networks while online payments, transactions, or debit card payments are registered in the internal bank systems. Like in China, IT experts can easily track anyone by their IP address, so the anonymity of interest users is only illusory and in the most countries of the world. All of this above doubts should give food for thoughts to political decision makers in view member states, especially those political and scientist circles which assume that the Chinese growth model can be at least partly copied only in underdeveloped African, Latin American, Central Asian, and other countries, including the Russian Federation, which understand and support this form of exercising authority. The belief that the old continent will remain entirely free from such social management methods can be delusional. And the last question, the China with its model of growth, multidimensional impact selected European states and their political elites, focusing on those groups that are disappointed with the liberal and democratic form of governance and with the free market. The Belt and Road Initiative and the accompanying various political, economic, and propaganda activities are aimed not only at the strengthening Chinese influence in Europe, but also somehow, by the way, and at disseminating and domesticating other elements of the Chinese development paradigm, including digital tools. The example of Hungary, Serbia, Belarus, and the number of African countries in particular are meaningful here. Thanks a lot for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Walkowski, and for your insightful, very interesting presentation on Csc shadows and rather not a soft policy instrument for drawing Taiwan. And this is not an attractive tool, rather contrary. Anyway, it's some number, as you mentioned, 1 billion cameras. It's amazing and is growing scrutiny of the society. So it's very, very interesting and awesome analyzing China and Taiwan and different paths of development. I would like to pass a voice to Professor Przemysław Osiewicz, who will deal on the topic of Taiwan relations with the MENA, Middle East and North Africa states, and a particular period in post-Arab Spring, and the question mark is toward a new pragmatism. The floor is yours, the table is yours. Actually,
the Zoom is mine, actually, and the table. Thank you very much, Radek. Thank you, Professor, for this nice introduction. And with reference to what Professor Walkowski has just said, once you mentioned these surveillance cameras, it came to my mind that they are proudly designed in Taiwan and assembled in China, right? So, I mean, the mainland China. So that's probably a kind of a paradox we have. But still, coming back to the main topic of my presentation, I will try to be as brief as possible. Well, I divided my presentation into like 3 parts. So the first is rather historical, so I would simply skip it, just give you some points of reference. Then I would like to focus on some political aspects, and last but not least on economic aspects, which are, in my opinion, which are quite interesting and informative at the same time. So if we are to talk about the nature of the relations between the Republic of China and Taiwan and the countries in the Middle East and North Africa, we have to refer to the Cold War period, because that was the period when these relations were at their best, right? So these relations were quite positive. What was the most important thing was that the anti-communist attitude of both the Republic of China and Taiwan and most of Middle Eastern countries brought them together, right? So they were anti-communist, especially countries like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, or all the United Arab Emirates. These countries follow this anti-communist attitude policy until most of them until 1970s, and that was the moment, like the same happened as we know with the Western countries, when they ceased to recognize the Republic of China on Taiwan as a sovereign state, and at the same time they recognized the People's Republic of China, or precisely the communist government of in the mainland China. But there was one exception, and most of us probably don't even remember about it, but it's very significant in my opinion, that the last Middle Eastern country which ceased to recognize the Republic of China was Saudi Arabia. And they did that only in 1990. So that was like the last moment. And the main reason for that, it's a kind of paradox. The main reason for that was the end of the Cold War, which actually enabled Saudi Arabia to establish close relations with the People's Republic of China and change the strategic objectives of this country. Well, to put it bluntly, a brand new big customer appeared. I mean, the country which started buying Saudi oil, and that was the main reason. I promise to skip this part here. If we were to focus on these political relations right now, obviously no country in North Africa or the Middle East recognizes the Republic of China and Taiwan formally, right? So we have informal links, but formally, obviously, there are no diplomatic links, and nothing indicates that that it will change in the foreseeable future. So that's the situation on the ground. We have I found this graphic quite interesting. I think it says a lot about the current attitude of Xi Jinping toward the region. And obviously the region plays a very important role within the Belt and Road Initiative. If anybody was curious why China backed, for example, the Assad regime in Syria, let me remind you, or let me tell you, that it was the second time in the history of the People's Republic of China that China officially took a side in any military conflict, right? So it happened only once in Sudan, and Syria is the second case in the history of the PRC in the post-Cold War period. And the main reason for that is the Belt and Road Initiative, because they need access to the Eastern Mediterranean. It's not that Xi Jinping or the Chinese authorities that they don't trust Turkey, but there are plans to build huge hubs, right? Maritime hubs in Syria, which will link a railroad or brand new railways from western provinces of China. They will link them to Syria, and then they will be able to ship cargo in the area of the Mediterranean or to any harbor spots in Western Europe, right? So it's an element of this game. Just not to mention the importance of oil and natural gas, but I will come to that in a few minutes. Well, I like this phrase from Csc article that was published last year. I think it tells a lot about the current policy of the Republic of China and Taiwan towards the region and towards especially toward the Middle East countries, that in the past, the Republic of China, I mean, before the 1970s, Taiwan had capabilities, but had no will to be active in the region. And the situation changed after the 1970s when suddenly the Republic of China had the intention to be active or recognized by the countries in the region, but at the same time it lost its capabilities, right? And we could observe a very similar but a reversible situation in the case of the People's Republic of China, because now China, I mean, the mainland China enjoys a free hand in the region, and they really try to exploit the position there, right? So we can say that I would always say we can criticize it, but I will always say that the attitude of the People's Republic of China is extremely pragmatic, and they know how to maximize the profits dealing with countries in the MENA region. Right, so that's the situation we have. I mentioned Saudi Arabia, and this kind of like still Saudi Arabia doesn't recognize the Republic of China and Taiwan officially, but there are informal links, and I will prove it with economic data that this I would say informal strategic alliance is pretty strong. The same could be said about the United Arab Emirates and Qatar. So these three states remain like key allies, in quotation marks, obviously, but still they play a very important role in the strategy. Well, here is just to prove that no country in the region recognizes the Republic of China and Taiwan, and I would like to underline the fact that nothing indicates that it will change in the foreseeable future. If we were to talk about any Taiwanese strategy toward the region, actually there is nothing like that, right? I mean, there is one informal strategy which is based on people-to-people diplomacy. Basically, that's what Taiwan was trying to do in the past with scholarships or informal relations. So, as I said, people-to-people relations. The basic assumption here was that once we, for example, accept a large number of students and we provide them with scholarships, they will be somehow grateful. If they become successful leaders in the countries of origin, they will be grateful still, and they will maybe change the official policies of these countries towards the Republic of China and Taiwan. Well, as a former grantee of the Ministry of Education of the Republic of China and Taiwan, I can tell you that I'm very grateful to the Taiwanese government, but at the same time, I have no capabilities to change our official policy, right? So, and there are like hundreds of people like me in Poland and in the other countries, right? So, I mean, this strategy cannot work. But what works, it's like business, contacts between businessmen. This connection really works. It's not mentioned here in this slide, but for example, in the United Arab Emirates, we have a number of institutions linking Taiwan with the United Arab Emirates in terms of investments, trade cooperation, like trade relations, and so on, right? So it's the Taiwanese are still very active, as I said, especially in the United Arab Emirates. So that's the country where they feel quite comfortable. And what is really important here, the mainland China does not criticize Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, or Qatar for these kind of activities. Obviously, as long as they don't, as the authorities of these countries do not refer to Taiwan as Taiwan, everything is in line, right? So obviously they use this iconic term Taipei in order to every time they want to refer to the country, and that's the main point. So nothing has changed with regard to these issues. If I were to support these, let's say some facts, political facts on things related to diplomatic issues with the hard data, I would focus on economic aspects, because I mean numbers don't lie. Well, I like this graph, so it tells you a lot about the attitude of the mainland China toward the region, and it's, well, I would say it's partially true. We cannot really say that the People's Republic of China is absolutely dependent on the region. It's not true. It's like it's only true in 50%, and I will prove it with some graphs. But yeah, we can find out, and that's what we will see in the following slides, that both the People's Republic of China and the Republic of China and Taiwan cooperate with the same partners, and the level of cooperation is more or less the same. Obviously, we cannot compare because in terms of population, obviously there is a huge difference. But once we count everything, let's say per capita, it will appear that these the partner states in terms of economic cooperation are more or less the same, and the level of cooperation, the level of exports is more or less the same. It's especially true in the case of Qatar and the liquefied natural gas. Well, with reference to the People's Republic of China's initiative, I mean, BRI, we have these 4 categories of strategic partnership. I always admire the Chinese way of naming things. I mean, that you can name, for example, institutions or forms of cooperation in a way which sounds really nice, but at the same time that you know that it's quite offensive, right? So it's offensive and nice at the same time, because it's, for example, innovative strategic partnership between Israel and China. China denied Israel of any right to have any strategic alliance with China, which is quite surprising given the very close relations between these countries. And Israel is one of few countries, not only in the Middle East but in the world, connected with the West, that sells military equipment to the People's Republic of China. But still, they only got this nickname "innovative strategic partnership." So it's because they once I read an article, don't remember the author, but the main thesis was that the Chinese authorities didn't really know how to frame this cooperation, and they didn't want to offend the Israeli authorities, right? So they found out that, okay, maybe it would be innovative strategic partnership, meaning that we cooperate only in terms of innovation and economic cooperation, not diplomatically, right? Taiwan exports to the Middle East, well, I checked up, it's mainly electronics, no surprise. Once some students asked me whether they buy bicycles in Taiwan. No, I mean, few people cycle in Middle Eastern countries, so don't expect them to buy bicycles in thousands, right? So, I mean, the Taiwanese corporations, they sell bicycles here in Europe, but not really in the Middle East. So, yeah, if we were to focus on numbers. And for example, with reference to crude oil, we'll find out that there are, as you can see, there are differences year to year. But once you find out that, for example, the quantity of oil bought in Saudi Arabia decreased in a given year, you'll find out that it was somehow fulfilled with the increase of imports from another country in the Middle East, right? So the Republic of China and Taiwan tries to maintain a kind of diversification of imports of fossil fuels, and it's a very smart policy. We cannot say that we cannot say the same about the liquefied natural gas, and well, the main reason here is that other countries, most of countries in the Middle East, they do not have such infrastructure, right? So they don't really export LNG for the moment. Some of them are working on these technologies, like Iran, for example, would like to export LNG. In this case, however, I'm quite sure that Iran will not sell LNG once there are no extended sanctions imposed, because that's the main limitation right now. Once they acquire a technology to liquefy natural gas, and that's the plan, they will not sell LNG to Taiwan. For obvious reasons. I mean, the level of interdependence with the People's Republic of China is so high that I'm quite sure that they will be blocked, or there would be the Beijing will exert much pressure on Tehran, so that they will not do so. Right? But it's just my expectation. We can talk about it later. 2 more minutes, Professor. Right. So have I 2 more? Okay. Yeah. Okay.
2 minutes.
Okay. With crude oil here in this graph, you can see precisely like the main exporters of crude oil to Taiwan. As you can see in this case, we can talk of that Taiwan is really dependent on the Middle Eastern countries. It's only partially true. Just for comparison, it's only partially true in the case of the People's Republic of China, right? So, it's a very smart strategy also, because the Chinese authorities try to diversify the sources of supplies, and that's what they do. That's what they can do actually, given that they have so many options. The Republic of China and Taiwan cannot really enjoy the same rights. They don't have access to many markets. Surprisingly, for example, the level of exports of LNG from the United States is pretty low in comparison with the level, as you will see in the following slide, with the level of such exports to the People's Republic of China. Quite frankly, well, I find it very interesting, and I'm really curious why it is so way. Why it is so way. I mean, my presentation is not about it, but I'm leaving you with this question, right? So why the main ally doesn't really want to provide one of its main allies in Southeast China with fossil fuels, and at the same time it offers fossil fuels to, let's say, the biggest opponent, not only in Asia, but in the world, right? But okay, business is business, right? So yeah. And last but not least, here we can see more or less that's what here we can see that in comparison the share of exports, the share of imports, sorry, of LNG to the mainland China and the US. The US part is pretty big in comparison with the Taiwanese imports, which is only 3%. So in conclusion, I would say that if we were to focus on these diplomatic relations, I will not be original. There is no chance that we could talk of any formal recognition of the Republic of China on Taiwan, or if anybody came with such an idea in the future, with a proclamation of sovereign state named Taiwan, it's absolutely out of question. Why? Because both the Republic of China and Taiwan and the Middle Eastern countries, they are absolutely dependent on major powers.